I want to just remind us, that throughout the discussions in the last couple of days at least, there was that refrain that kept being used about no worker left behind. The anticipation that with everything that's happening on the environmental front, and particularly on the climate change front, the fact that greenhouse gas emissions become the number one target for what's happening, and particularly the fossil fuel industry, that what's happening in terms of the possible and shift in transition that will take place. If it's going to be a just transition, then obviously no worker should be left behind. But having said that, it's a lot easier said than done. And one of the things that we did as a Green Economy Network, starting off from the very beginning, back in September 30th of 2009, around the time of the Copenhagen climate summit that took place, we all started to say we have to roll up our sleeves and start doing something about this and start looking at what needs to happen. But while other people are working on various parts and pieces of the climate change challenge, we said that we had to take up the transition challenge, and particularly the whole question of what happens when people lose their jobs, are highly trained in certain areas of work. That work is not necessarily the exact found or replicated elsewhere. The jobs and the economy are not shifting in that direction. What do we do, and how do we work at it? And the way we began to work at this was to say that, a just transition can't take place unless there's a solid commitment being made to finding and developing and promoting job creation in a variety of sectors. And so we started by looking at the question of, where do you begin this? How do you understand what sectors are really directly affected? And before you do that, take a look at what sectors are causing the problem in the first place. And one of the things that we found out just by looking at and spending our time doing our analysis of this was that there were several sectors of the economy that were the direct cause. And obviously fossil fuels and oil and gas in particular were one, and coal of course were one particular sector. Another particular sector was transportation. Given the fact that we have plenty of cars on the road and trucks on the road and everything else, and that is a huge generator of greenhouse gas emissions. And thirdly, we looked at buildings and the whole question of construction itself and buildings and heavy machinery, and found out that a great deal of the greenhouse gas emissions were generated from that sector as well. And so we said to ourselves, look, we've got to turn this around, and we've got to find out a new way of looking at the economy. And so instead of the massive investments and subsidies and everything else that goes to the fossil fuel industry, we've got to look at what it means to build a really viable renewable energy industry in this country. So whether it's wind power or solar power or geothermal power or tidal power or small-scale hydro, we have the capacity in this country. Just like we have for oil and gas and coal, we also have enormous capacity for those renewable energy industries. The problem is people talk about it, but we're not getting it done. And we're not getting it done because public investments aren't being made there to make it go of it. And even though renewable, all these things, renewable energy or the retrofitting of buildings, which was another area of the whole puzzle that we looked at. And then on top of that, we concentrated on public transit and high-speed rail as the way of dealing with the whole question of the future of the economy and transportation. And so we began to put these pieces together, largely on a volunteer basis. There are a number of people from the steering committee that are here today that were there at the very beginning and have really contributed a great deal to helping making this work go ahead, but doing it on a volunteer basis on the side of their own work. And we put together a common platform called Making the Shift to the Green Economy, which has been revised a couple of times since it was first and originally done, but done with a great deal of concentration on the overall picture of the overall strategy and the overall thing we had to address. And so gradually what was happening is that we were beginning to develop an approach here that, that really focused in on something that was strategic and something that was targeted. We said that, first of all, that there had to be targeted public investments if you're going to create jobs. So targeted public investments, and then targeted job creation, and then thirdly, targeted greenhouse gas reductions. And we put this package together and this plan of action together, and did it by looking at the sectors of the economy that we were just mentioning. Investments in renewable energy, producing so many jobs, producing so many, and up there on the screen you can see some of the various sectors on the left-hand side coming down, and then across the top we have a very definite mark on the economy. What we have put together is a 5-year plan, excuse me, to accomplish just that. The second thing is that these are not just green jobs, they are also climate jobs. And the reason why we call them climate jobs is that by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we are going after the real source of the climate crisis.